So, friends, this podcast started some years ago as a personal hobby. It has become a little more than that. Over the years of this podcast, I have basically done all of the work of the podcast by myself: show notes, recording, editing. But I'm grateful that I have a new partnership with Luke Clayton and the team at increasecreative.co. They are helping me to produce each new episode of this podcast. So, this will, I hope, help us to publish on a more regular basis on Mondays, and will up the game on the quality of this podcast. Luke and his team does great work. I'd love to commend them to you. You can look them up again at increasecreative.co, or find more information on the show notes of this episode. Check them out. This is the On Preaching Podcast with H.B. Charles Jr., the podcast dedicated to helping you preach faithfully, clearly, and better. Good day, friends. Thanks for listening to this episode of the On Preaching Podcast. In this episode, I want to talk to you about simple ways to preach better. However, before we jump into today's topic, let me recommend a resource to you. There's a book a friend of mine commended to me that I have found very helpful. The book is entitled Preacher, Keep Yourself from Idols. It is written by Derek Tidball, who was principal of London School of Theology for 12 years and is currently visiting scholar at Spurgeon's College London. Well, that can't be true anymore because that school no longer exists as of last year. But he's a Baptist minister who has served local churches and denominational roles and theological education, and he's an excellent writer. And this book, Preacher, Keep Yourself from Idols. May I just read you the table of contents? The idol of the pulpit, the idol of authority, the idol of popularity, the idol of success, the idol of entertainment, the idol of novelty, the idol of secularization, the idol of oratory, the idol of immediacy, the idol of professionalism, the idol of busyness, the idol of familiarity. Yikes. This is an important book about the soul care that each of us as ministers of the gospel need to be doing on an ongoing basis. This is really about 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16. Guard your life. Guard your life. Watch your life. Keep a close watch on your life. This book will help you do that. Preacher, keep yourself from idols. Pick it up. Thank me later. I trust it will be a blessing to you. I hope as you begin this new year of ministry, you're thinking about how to grow as a preacher. And in this episode, I just want to offer you some simple ways to preach better. Preaching is not simple or easy. It is hard work. And I'm not trying to diminish by anything I say the very real hard work that is required to preach well. But when I mention here simple ways to preach better, I think what I'm trying to get across to you is that you won't become an expert preacher overnight. You won't go from a struggling preacher to an excellent preacher overnight. You can't make that quantum leap. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the becoming. Just focus on the process. And as you just practice the process, if I could put it another way, you got to learn how to go to the gym every day without like jumping on the scale every day. You know, the temptation is to, you know, go to the gym, exercise one day, and then you start checking the scale to see if you lost anything. But don't worry about the end goal. Just work on the process. And if you do the little things week in and week out, you'll grow in your preaching. And I just want to recommend some simple, practical, helpful ways, I trust, that you can start preaching better, or improving your preaching, or polish your preaching. Nothing deep, nothing exotic, nothing technical here. This is not an exhaustive list, and I think another episode of this down the road will come again as I think more on this subject. But let's start here with some simple ways to preach better. The first thing I'll mention is hug the text. Hug the text. I'm not talking about in your study. I mean in your sermon. I really do think if you start a sermon and you call a text and you tell the church, the text is Psalm 23, and you read Psalm 23, I just think, well, first of all, you have set in your hearer's mind the expectation that you're going to talk about Psalm 23. Don't call that text or read that text and abandon it. And don't bump into the text accidentally every now and then along the way. Hug the text. Be explaining it. Be applying it. Be illustrating it. Build your outline around the text. Let your introduction point to the text. Let your conclusion summarize the point you were trying to make about the text. Let your main idea, your big idea be a crystallization of the text. In that sermon, put as much Bible in it as you can. Hug the text. If you stay close to the text in your sermon, because the sermon, the text is the best part of the sermon. I heard a story about a preacher who, every time he heard a preacher, he always found something encouraging to say. And after one sermon, his students just knew there was no way he'd find anything kind to say about that sermon. So when they asked him, "Hey, Doc, what did you think about that sermon?" he says, "At least he had a good text." The text is the best part of the sermon. Hug the text. Number 2, less is more. And I'll confess, I need an organist in here, pianist, to start playing just as I am, so I can come to the altar and rededicate my life. I'll admit that I am prone to stuff as much in the sermon as I can. And I don't think that's most effective, even when at times I may seem to get away with it. I think less is more. I think you want your sermon to be like a sword with one sharp point, rather than like a broom with a bunch of thistles that going different directions. If you're outlining, think about this. Less is more. If you're going to use cross-references, I think there are times where I do believe in the analogy of Scripture. I do believe Scripture interprets Scripture. I do think a powerful way to argue the text is to show that this truth is being taught in other places as well, but I think you can overdo it. I think you can overdo it. I think illustrations are key to sermons. A house should have windows. But you don't want to live in a glass house. The glass house is proverbially not a good thing. Less is more. Number 3, shorten your introduction. Shorten your introduction. If I may press on a little further with the house analogy, if the illustrations are the windows of this house, the introduction is the front porch. The front porch is just a transitional passageway into the house. It should be clean. It should be inviting. It should have some sense of curb appeal. But you don't put the big screen and the refrigerator and the dining room table and the living room couch on the porch. No, you don't want people to stop and stay on the porch. You want them to get through the porch into the meat of the message. Shorten that introduction. Don't use the introduction to dump in all of the material that you couldn't find another place for. I think a simple way to preach better, for me, my goal is my introduction cannot go past page 1. If that introduction goes into page 2, I have to edit down. I don't want people to think that my introductory ideas about the text are more important than the text. Shorten your introduction. I also want to say another way you can preach better is transition smoothly. A lot of accidents happen at intersections. A lot of accidents happen when people are trying to shift from one lane to another. And a lot of bad things happen in sermons when they're not clear transitions. So I think even if you don't write out a complete manuscript, there are things you need to work on to make sure you have those areas clear. And one of them is your transition. How are you getting from your introduction to your main body? How are you moving from from point 1 in your outline to point 2? How are you transitioning from the main body to the conclusion? Work hard to transition smoothly. Number 5, I think you'll preach better if you own your manuscript or own the outline. Whatever it is you take to the pulpit to preach, you need to have your arms around it as best you can. And whatever that means, whatever that looks like for you, I do have preaching friends that memorize the whole sermon. Then there are others who take the full manuscript to the pulpit, but they mark it up with a red pen or a highlighter. There are those who kind of write notes to themselves, an extended outline. But whatever that process looks like for you, you want to own it. There are times where I just think the sermon did not go as well as it could because the sermon was well prepared. And I think, the sermon was well prepared, but I think I neglected to own my manuscript. And I just think I'm a better preacher when I have my arms around the material, where I know where this thing is going. Yeah, I feel like they're not with me in this part of the sermon, but that's all right. I know I got a really good illustration coming. They'll get with me soon enough. You know what I'm saying? I think the more you own your manuscript, the more it'll help you to preach better. I also think you should mark up your preaching Bible. Mark up your preaching Bible. This is your sword. I've gone places to preach, and some kind young man says, "Pastor, can I carry your Bible?" And my answer is, if I can fight with this sword, I can carry it. I don't need an armor bearer. If I'm gonna fight with this sword, I can carry it. So let's start here. I think you ought to carry a Bible to the pulpit. I think there is a powerful symbol in a man standing behind an open Bible to preach. And that Bible that you preach from, you should mark it up. You should highlight, underline, make notes to yourself. I put in cross-references. Not only should you own your manuscript, but you should, if I may say it this way, own your preaching Bible. This is the main tool. You have a Bible and a set of notes, and that's all you have to work with in that pulpit. Make sure that everything you take to the pulpit is useful to help you communicate clearly. Number 7, I think this is simple. There's a whole discussion about sermon delivery, but one practical thing I want to say about sermon delivery, one simple way to preach better is just to make eye contact. So I often recommend that a preacher should write a full sermon manuscript and then pare it down to a smaller set of notes, primarily to encourage the preacher to preach that sermon rather than reading the manuscript. And what's the difference between reading the manuscript and preaching the sermon? I mean, in a lot of ways, the difference is looking up and making eye contact with the people to whom you are preaching to. You do not stand there to read an essay to them. You stand to proclaim a message. And one simple way, without you moving around, without theatrics, without props, one way to connect to the congregation to which you're preaching is just to make eye contact. Number 8, don't be unnecessarily technical. I don't mean dumb down the sermon. I don't mean oversimplify the truth. But I also don't think that it is helpful for you to just, I don't know. I just think people feel like you're scholarly or intellectual for just throwing out random big terms. And that's not how Jesus preached. That's not how Paul wrote. I know you can go back and read a Spurgeon sermon now, and the language may seem lofty, but one of the criticisms of Spurgeon's preaching in his day, people complained about how common his preaching was. They acted as if it was vulgar because he preached in plain language, in simple language. It's not a bad thing for it to be said of you that the common people heard him gladly. If you're going to use a term that's technical, explain it or restate that term. Don't do it in a condescending manner. And yes, there is a teaching element to preaching, and so there should be, to some degree, times where you are bringing up terms that are technical and need to be explained, but don't unnecessarily be technical in the pulpit. Number 9, limit quotations. Limit quotations. I think one of the things that marked a difference in my preaching from my earlier years to more recent years, I think my maturation as a preacher over the years is characterized by less quotation. There are things I wish I said. I do think that a good quotation can carry the weight of a full illustration. And I want to give credit where credit is due. So I do use quotations. But I say limit your quotations because you want the sermon to be a sermon, not a research paper. You know, if every paragraph you quoting this author, this theologian, this commentator, the sermon can come off like a research paper rather than a message from God to his people. Limit your quotation. I think another way to preach better is ask rhetorical questions. I mean, there's a whole series of that could be preached just on the questions Jesus asked. Or for that matter, in Old Testament stories, questions God asks. Even from the first question to Adam, where are you? I think questions can be used effectively for provoking thought, for bringing conviction, and for pointing to application. Ask very good questions. Number 11, call for a verdict. Call for a verdict. You're not merely reporting the news. Don't think of yourself as a journalist, a reporter who's just there to just the facts, ma'am. No. You are an attorney making a case, and you want to call for a verdict. You want to call for a verdict. You want to preach in such a way that, as the case on the day of Pentecost, they're asking, what should we do? And you need to be prepared to, man, what good is it to cast the net if you don't pull it in? So we need to cast the net in preaching, and then we need to draw the net in preaching. Call for a verdict. Preach for a decision. Point them not just to the truth, but challenge them to live out the life of the teachings of our faith. Number 12, land the plane only once. Don't end multiple times. Don't, as I close, 5 times in the sermon. Don't, man, if you got to say, and I mean it this time, I'm through. You've already gone too far. Man, I have been on the plane where the pilot had to abort a landing. And I think that has been the most nerve-wracking experience. Turbulence, rough takeoffs, etc. Man, but when that plane is coming down, you wanna get the plane on the ground safely. You want to land the plane only once. This is a random list of simple ways to preach better. What do you think about this list? What would you add to this list? What simple ways would you recommend to help preach faithfully, clearly, and better? You can reach me at hbcharlesjr.com. There you'll find various other sermon manuscripts, podcast episodes, and various other resources that may be a help to you in your devotional life, pastoral leadership, and sermon preparation. You also can subscribe to the Cutting It Straight newsletter there. This year we'll use that a little more strategically to update you on speaking engagements that I may have across the country over the course of the year, and a couple of special things that we're up to at Cutting It Straight, and various resources that we make available there for free week in and week out. You can also find me on social media, X, Instagram, Facebook is the handle. You'll find me on each of those platforms. You can download new episodes of this podcast if you subscribe to it on whatever platforms you use to listen to podcasts. Come on. You're listening to the podcast. Subscribe on Facebook to our Cutting It Straight page, or on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Come on. Subscribe. And if you like, rate, comment on the podcast, you'll help others find this material, and I will consider it a personal favor. Thank you in advance. Likewise, this September 22 through 24, will be the Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference. Just mark your calendar and plan on being there with us for this year's conference. We have great things in store that we're excited about to help you preach faithfully, clearly, and better. In fact, we're trying to organize the conference this year to really lean into 3 themes that matter to me that I've written books on preaching, on pastoring, and on worship. So I hope you'll join us for Cutting It Straight 2026. And I hope you'll join us for the next episode of the On Preaching podcast. Until then, friends, thanks for listening. All the best.
For more information or resources, or to contact me, go to www.hbcharlesjr.com.